What's the real difference between a psychological breakdown and an actual demonic possession? Sometimes that line is so thin, it literally disappears. It's an insane thought that the walls of our own minds aren't strong enough to keep pure evil out. Or maybe the mind itself can create horrors more powerful than any demon. Most stories like this are just whispers, turning into nothing more than legends. But some were documented, step by step, by the people who witnessed them. The records they left behind give us zero easy answers. Instead, they paint an absolutely chilling picture of human suffering, faith, and a darkness that is impossible to just explain away. Tonight, we're looking at two of the craziest, darkest, most mysterious cases ever, separated by decades, but connected by a raw, unshakable terror. These aren't just ghost stories, right? They are documented historical accounts of real people who found themselves fighting an unseen, evil force. First, we'll dive into the insane 1928 exorcism of a woman whose mind became a psychological prison, where the demons of her past took on a terrifying physical form. Then, we'll look at the story of a young boy from 1949. His body became a literal weapon, unleashing a violent storm that challenged the faith of seasoned priests and revealed a reality more sinister than they could have ever imagined. These are accounts of what can happen when the veil between worlds seems to just rip open and something awful slips through. There are stories of faith pushed to its absolute breaking point, and of the lingering, unsettling question: are these forces from another world, or do they come from the darkest corners of the human mind? Our first story takes us to the American Midwest, to a time when the world was caught between old world faith and new science. This is the story of a woman known by the pseudonym Emma Schmidt, though some records also call her Anna Eklund. Her case is considered one of the most thoroughly documented exorcisms in American history. It's not because of one single dramatic event, but because her torment went on for so long. Emma was born in Wisconsin around 1882 to a German-American Catholic family. By all accounts, her childhood was all about faith, but it was also filled with darkness. Her life was destroyed by trauma from a young age. Her father, Jacob, was reportedly a violent man, and it's alleged that he and his mistress, a woman named Mina, subjected Emma to horrific abuse. Mina was even rumored to practice witchcraft, and, according to accounts from a later pamphlet called Begone Satan, people believed she had cursed Emma by hiding spelled herbs in her food. Whether from a curse or from insane trauma, around the age of 14, Emma's world began to completely fall apart. A girl who was once super religious began to show a deep and violent hatred for anything sacred. She couldn't enter a church without being flooded with intrusive, violent thoughts. Cade, the sight of a crucifix or the touch of holy water would make her completely disgusted. Doctors were called in, specialists who examined her from top to bottom, but they were baffled. According to their findings, Emma Schmidt was, for all intents and purposes, physically and mentally normal. There was no medical explanation for her torment, but her suffering was undeniable. It wasn't a sickness of the body, but what the church could only describe as a sickness of the soul. For years, Emma's condition would get better, then way worse. A first exorcism was performed in 1912 by Father Theophilus Riesinger, a determined monk who was deeply disturbed by what he saw. For a little while, it seemed to work. The symptoms faded, and Emma went back to a normal life, but the peace didn't last. The darkness came back, and by 1928, it had a death grip on her life. Now, 46 years old, Emma was desperate. This led her to a tiny, isolated convent in Erling, Iowa, and back to Father Riesinger, who by then was one of the most experienced exorcists in the country. He knew this wouldn't be simple. He arranged for the exorcism to happen in the convent to protect Emma's identity and to have the support of the Franciscan nuns. Only the strongest of them were chosen to help, though none of them could have been prepared for what they were about to go through. The ordeal began in August of 1928. Emma was brought to a room and strapped to a heavy iron bed. Father Riesinger began the rite of exorcism, his voice filling the room with ancient Latin prayers. What followed wasn't a single epic showdown, but a grueling 23-day siege spread across 3 insane sessions from August to December. The accounts, documented by Father Riesinger and put into the pamphlet, Begone, Satan, paint a horrifying picture. Emma's body would twist into unnatural positions. She would thrash with so much force that it took several strong nuns just to hold her down. She vomited strange substances, and the inhuman sounds she made were so loud they reportedly echoed through the small town, making neighbors wonder if someone was being murdered inside the convent. Then, things got even crazier. According to the priest's records, Emma began speaking in languages she had supposedly never learned. It's worth remembering that these claims, like many from the case, come from the eyewitness accounts of the clergy, and we can't independently verify them. They're part of a story shaped by intense religious belief. The voices that spoke through her weren't just random noises. They identified themselves. The priests believed they were dealing with multiple entities: Beelzebub, Judas Iscariot, and, most chillingly, the spirits of her own dead father, Jacob, and his mistress, Mina. The voice identified as her father was said to be especially cruel, mocking her and claiming he had cursed her after she rejected his incestuous advances years earlier. Whether this was a real spirit or a creation of Emma's deep trauma is impossible to say, but for the people in that room, the evil felt 100% real. Mina's spirit allegedly confessed to placing the curse on Emma's food, starting the possession decades before. And this is where it gets wild. The pamphlet, Begone, Satan, details even more extreme events. It claims that Emma's body would levitate off the bed, and at one point, she was allegedly thrown through the air and clung to the wall high above the door. These extraordinary accounts are, of course, just what the people in the room said they saw, viewed through the lens of a supernatural battle. Skeptics would argue these could be exaggerations or just misinterpretations of frantic, convulsive movements. But the horror wasn't just happening to Emma. The priests and nuns reported experiencing psychological attacks themselves. They were hit with feelings of deep dread, exhaustion, and disturbing temptations. The very air in the room was described as thick with a disgusting, unbearable stench. The whole thing took a visible toll on everyone, especially Father Riesinger. Witnesses said that over the course of the exorcism, he looked like he had aged 20 years. His faith was tested to its absolute limit as he battled day and night against the forces tormenting the woman on the iron bed. The final showdown happened on December 23, 1928, after weeks of non-stop prayer. Father Riesinger made his final, desperate command. In a loud, clear voice, he shouted the words of the rite, "Begone, Satan, depart, you fiends of hell." And then, silence. According to the witnesses, Emma's body went limp. A final, terrifying scream ripped from her throat, followed by her own voice, clear for the first time in weeks. "My Jesus, mercy. Praised be Jesus Christ." The struggle was over. Emma Schmidt lived the rest of her life in peace, reportedly never needing another exorcism. The nuns who had helped, however, were so deeply affected that, within a year, every single one had transferred to a different convent. The story of Emma Schmidt leaves us in a place of deep unease. Was she truly a victim of a demonic curse, unleashed by the horrific abuse she suffered as a child? Or was she a woman suffering from a profound and tragic psychological breakdown, her mind creating literal demons to cope with unspeakable trauma? The documents offer no easy answer, leaving us with only the chilling account of a battle fought in the deepest parts of the human soul. While Emma's story is a terrifying battle fought inside the mind, where trauma and the supernatural just blur together. Our next story is a confrontation that was brutally, undeniably physical. This case would become the direct inspiration for one of the most terrifying movies ever made. And it all started with a child's toy. In 1949, in a quiet Maryland suburb, lived a 14-year-old boy. For over 70 years, he was known only by the pseudonym Roland Doe, but his real name has since been revealed as Ronald Hunkler. He was an only child, described as quiet and studious. His life was, by all accounts, perfectly ordinary till the death of his beloved Aunt Harriet. Aunt Harriet was a spiritualist, and she had introduced Ronald to the Ouija board, teaching him how to use it to talk to the other side. After she passed away, a grieving Ronald started using the board all the time, hoping to contact her. Instead, something else seemed to answer. It started small. Scratching sounds echoed from inside the walls and floors of their home at night. At first, they thought it was rats, but exterminators found nothing. Then, the weird events started to center on Ronald. His mattress would shake violently in the night, sometimes with enough force to literally throw him from the bed. Sacred objects, like a picture of Christ on the wall, were said to rattle whenever he was nearby. Terrified, his family sought help from doctors and psychiatrists, but just like with Emma Schmidt, they couldn't find any medical or psychological cause for what was happening. Desperate, the Lutheran family turned to their local pastor. After witnessing the insane events for himself, including seeing a heavy armchair flip over with no one nearer, he advised them to seek help from the Catholic Church, famously telling them the Catholics know about this kind of thing. This led them to a series of Jesuit priests who would ultimately take on the insane task of trying to free the boy. The priests began their investigation cautiously, but what they wrote down in their detailed diaries defies any simple explanation. Father William Aspidorn was the lead priest, and his detailed journal provides the backbone of what we know about the exorcism of Roland Doe. It's critical to remember that much of what we know comes from these diaries. They are detailed accounts from men of faith, not independently verified scientific reports. The priests documented how red, welt-like scratches would spontaneously appear on Ronald's body. According to their diaries, these scratches would sometimes form words like hell or evil. On one occasion, the word Louis reportedly materialized on his chest, which the family took as a sign to take the boy to relatives in St. Louis, Missouri. The move didn't stop the crazy events, it made them worse. The exorcism continued there, becoming a brutal, weeks-long ordeal that moved between a relative's home and the Alexian Brothers Hospital. Father Bowder, assisted by Father Walter Halloran and others, chronicled the terrifying events. They described Ronald speaking in a guttural voice, spitting, cursing, and showing an extreme hatred for any sacred object brought near him. The physical events were especially violent. The priest's diaries described the boy's bed shaking so violently it took multiple people to hold it still. During an early attempt at the rite, one priest, Father Hughes, was allegedly slashed by Ronald, who had reportedly ripped a metal spring from the mattress. Later in the ordeal, it's recorded that Ronald broke Father Halloran's nose. Skeptics have argued that Ronald may have just been a clever, disturbed teenager faking the events for attention. One investigator pointed out that no one ever checked the boy's fingernails to see if he was making the scratches himself. One of the priests present, Father Halloran, even expressed his own skepticism years later, stating he never heard the boy's voice truly change and believed he was just mimicking the Latin words he overheard the priest saying. Still, the sheer number of witnesses makes the case hard to just dismiss. Some reports claim as many as 48 people witnessed parts of the exorcism, though the number of people present at any single time was likely much smaller. For the priests who were there, night after night, the events were terrifyingly real. They described a struggle that was both physically and spiritually draining, as they prayed over a boy who writhed, cursed, came, and seemed to be possessed by a force of incredible strength and malice. The climax came on April 18, 1949, at the Alexian Brothers Hospital. After weeks of battle, during one of the final sessions. Ronald suddenly went into a trance. The guttural voice was gone. Instead, in a clear, commanding tone, he spoke, saying, "Satan, I am Saint Michael. I command you, Satan, and the other evil spirits, to leave the body in the name of Dominus, immediately. Now, now, now." According to the priest's diaries, the boy's body went through one last violent convulsion. A loud, cracking sound, like a gunshot, echoed through the hospital wing, a code through the hospital wing. And then there was peace. Ronald awoke with no memory of the final event, or of most of the exorcism. The scratching, the shaking bed, the voices, it all just stopped. And this is the craziest part of the whole story. Ronald Hunkler, the boy once known as Roland Doe, went on to live a completely normal, successful, and unremarkable life. He became a NASA engineer, contributing to the Apollo space missions that put a man on the moon. He married, had children, and lived quietly in a Maryland suburb until his death from a stroke in 2020 at the age of 85. He rarely, if ever, spoke of the events of 1949. According to a companion, he lived in constant fear that his colleagues would discover his secret and would even leave his home every Halloween, terrified of being found. The horror of Roland Doe isn't in spinning heads or Hollywood special effects. It's in the meticulously kept records of deeply faithful men who believed they were fighting a literal demon. It's in the unanswered questions about a disturbed boy who may have been a brilliant trickster, or a victim of something truly beyond our comprehension. And it's in the unnerving silence that followed the fact that this violent, insane storm simply ended, allowing a boy to grow up and help send humanity to the stars, leaving behind only a chilling diary that would go on to inspire The Exorcist and terrify the world. Two stories, two lives, completely torn apart by forces we can't explain. Emma Schmidt's ordeal seems born from deep psychological trauma, her mind a prison where abuse took on demonic names. Roland Doe's story is one of shocking physical violence, an external attack seemingly triggered by a single objective doorway opened that should have stayed shut. In both cases, records were kept by people who were convinced they were witnessing a battle between good and evil, but even their accounts leave us with no answers. Are these forces from another world, intelligent and evil beings that feed on human suffering? Are they insane manifestations of psychosis, where the mind gives terrifying form to its own pain? Or do they come from the darkest, most hidden parts of the human spirit itself, given power by our own belief? The documents exist, the witnesses gave their testimony, but the truth is still strange, dark, and mysterious. If you think these stories are as insane as I do, smash that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the unknown. And I need to know. Comment below which case you found more terrifying: the psychological prison of Emma Schmidt, or the physical onslaught of Roland Doe.